Everybody hear me okay? Good morning, everybody. My name is Dixon Wright, and I'm with Wells Fargo Insurance Services. And while I may be at Wells Fargo and specializing in surety bonds, I come to you today actually as a volunteer with a group called XBRL-CET, which is Extended Business Reporting Language for Construction, Energy, and Transportation. And this work actually began in my personal work towards improving access to surety credit for small business. My position has always been that if we could reduce the administrative costs of dealing with providing financial services to small business, providing those businesses with financial services would be actually a lot more productive, a lot more profitable, and therefore help the small business community. The reality is there's no real difference between running a contract for a small business or running a utility scale solar project. So the background of my work actually created a great segue into the energy business when I joined Wells Fargo. So I know this is first thing in the morning, so we'll start off with a little bit of levity. We'll start off with a joke. So a wealthy man has a party at his house, and he invites a lot of young men suitors, and he sets them up one side of the pool. And he says, gentlemen, because whoever wishes to have the hand of my beautiful daughter, all you'll have to do is swim across that pool, and you'll have your choice, the hand of my daughter or my wealth. Of course, in the pool, there's a bunch of sharks, piranhas. Sure enough, boom, there's a splash. Guy's swimming frantically across, comes up the other end, and the father looks at him and says, well, what'll it be, the hand of my daughter or my wealth? Forget that, I just want to know who pushed me in. So push it in. That's actually the topic. So when we talk about what we're, the data streaming and all the rest, the fact of the matter is we're all getting pushed in whether or not we know it or not. So my quick overview is simply, relative to the energy space, we keep talking about today's conference, and I know we're going to do it later in O&M, there's going to be a change in the level of information that's available. And yesterday, as you look at my array, it's just a simple deal, we really didn't know how the array was doing in the financial services side. But so the question is, if the O&M providers are going to start creating the ability to monitor and track and provide us quality information, what can happen with that? What is the potential for that? And what we're trying to do in our CAT herd is to have sort of an awareness campaign so that people recognize what's going on out there, so that it can contribute to the uniformity of data standards, so that people in the financial sector like myself can have a consistent flow of data that allows us to do analytical. Because the question we ask, which of the two panels in the future will get better financial terms? It's pretty easy. The one that we can understand is actually performing per design and is actually a profitable asset. So again, our group is really just about herding cats, just like I'm here today. So we don't have any software, we don't do anything in our group, but we try to get people who are in the space and the various stakeholders to recognize what's going on in a bigger scheme so that they contribute and collaborate toward what ends up being a more productive outcome. So when we talk about that, we always say the chicken and the egg. What comes first? Here you guys have great data out there, but if there's nobody there to receive it, it's no good. So what our project here is to recognize you can't implement a send and receive unless you actually try to do both at the same time, which is really a challenge. Because the chasm between what is possible and what you have to do to get there, the risks are too high, the costs are too much. And particularly since the cost of miscalculation is so high. I mean, nobody wants to be responsible for a software project that went wrong, or the scope creep that busted the budget and had something end up that was basically shelved. There's too many stories out there for people not to recognize, and they're very, very cautious, and we understand that. So trying to somehow or another make it easier for people to make that leap means we're going to have to be able to give some level of confidence that this is real, this is going to happen. And if you don't join in, then you will be left behind. So how do I herd the cats? You're looking at it. I've attended conferences with the AGC, Associated General Contractors. I've been with city councils. We talk at trade associations. It's all about awareness. Because Wells Fargo is in the same position as just about every other business out there. We can't say what we're doing because we don't know what we're doing. And unless we say what we're doing, nobody knows what we're doing. And there comes the confusion. So what we're hoping to do by this group and by these awareness is to bring everybody together so that everybody who's sitting on the fence ultimately comes over and says, okay, I'm with you. And so our mission, really, is just to get one outlook, one A, as I call it. So I know you're all probably very technical being in this room, but I give this presentation and give it some context so you can understand what I'm talking about when I say data and data exchange, because it gets kind of complicated. Everybody's very familiar with Outlook, all right? And what is Outlook? But it's a software application. I would suggest that Outlook is no different a software application than any one of your monitoring systems, asset management, CPM systems, CMS systems, you name them. At the end of the day, it's a database that holds data. And why is it that we cannot exchange information from these systems? Well, it's because they don't talk. But in Outlook, we're very comfortable. We just right-click. We say, hey, give me my contact data. And what you'll have is a data file. The data stream, and if you're familiar with XML, you realize it's just an XML file that Outlook kicks out. You drop it into an email, and nobody thinks anything about it. You've attached a file. You send it to someone. You are actually doing data interoperability. Nobody here cares whether or not that address file came from Lotus or Google or Outlook. The fact is, it's fully transportable, it's easy to share, and it's data interoperability in a very simplest state. So, what's the difference between a file for a contact information and a file for a project? Actually, there's nothing. It's a data file. And it allows somebody who you're doing business with to import it. Doesn't matter where it is in their system. If you're familiar with mapping and API and all the rest, you realize that's the easy part. The challenge is in knowing the data definition is the same. So a company profile. And here again, we go back to my panel array. As long as we all understand what the data definitions are, we should be able to exchange information between each other. What information am I talking about? One of the groups I participate is with IEC. They have a working group for data standards. And if you look at these 4 fields here, those are the 4 fields that basically tell me how it's doing. And so while I'm providing financial products guaranteeing the performance of assets, in the past and historically, that performance guarantee has generally been done with a letter of credit. Well, if I have the level of information that lets me know that this asset is performing period after period, whether it be monthly, quarterly, annually, these projects can go for 20 years on our financial guarantees. With this information, it's only 4 fields. We can literally go back to our customers and say, I don't need to have 100% cash collateral. I'm comfortable with my risk. I can do it without collateral. One of the biggest barriers for developing solar projects, connecting the interconnection, or doing the interconnection, and all the other associated financial obligations that you're obligated to stand behind, is the cash required to put up those financial securities. So if we can figure out a way to where the risk bearer, in our case surety bonds, or even an insurance carrier, which is providing insurance coverage, had better knowledge. Now, we're not talking about 100% information. We don't need it all. What you need to know, what's nice to know. What I need to know are really these 4 things. So if the industry were all to get around the IEC standard, or the IEC standard, evolved into something else, I don't care what it evolves into. I just want to consume the information succinctly and accurately. So that's what our mission statement is, to come up with a group of data sets that represent the information that we'd like to have and to exchange. And again, the objective is that the information can come into the system from any business user, and it can go to any user, any system, any place. To give you an example, the Department of Energy has put out a thing called the Green Button. You may be familiar with it. Basically, what the Green Button is it's a component of the overall national shift from our energy infrastructure, our national grid, into what is now going to become the smart grid. And this transition is going to be very challenging, as you can imagine, going from what were individually run utility fiefdoms to an integrated relationship between multiple energy providers, buyers, and sellers, and all the rest. One of the first steps that the government did to do this was created the Green Button. And what that basically is, just like the address file, it's a data set. And the data set is your energy usage. So it doesn't matter, again, like an address file, where you're getting it from. It could be Con Edison, PG&E, Southern California Edison. All the utilities have the exact same data set for what they will export. On the import side, you're then able to create applications that analyze it. So as part of the green button, because the data set is standardized, all of the computer guys in the room and in the industry can actually do something with it. And so what's happening in the green button world is there's probably 100 different applications now that are analyzing the green button. Enabled because the government said this is what you can expect, reliably and consistently, regardless of the utility, regardless of who your user is. Then we pushed it down to the consumer. You know it as the smart meter. It changed your energy information from being an analog, I use 30 watts this month, to exactly digitally how you did it. So these applications are actually able to develop energy savings plans based on Intel because the information was better and because they could actually do it. Now they could aggregate it up. So the smart meter at your house is really where the data stream enters into the national grid, down to that granular level. Well, when you think about building a facility, an asset, an interconnection, that entry point is the contract. So if you think about the data set for a contract, how many people could use the data set for a contract? Well, I write surety bonds. I want to know the contract, who the contractor is, where the location is, what the contract amount is, other specific information about a contract. You try to get insurance. What the insurance guy wants to know? Hey, the contract, the name, and all the rest. You try to get bank financing, what they need to know? Hey, guess what? We're all actually using almost identically the same fields, although respectfully in our own stakeholder group, shall we say, in the finance world, the insurance world, we may apply different mechanisms to it, different systems. At the end of the day, the core of the information is the same. And if we can understand what the data set is, like the government did with the green button, then you can only imagine what the internal programmers, as well as external and third-party vendors, they will all be able to really amplify the value add that they bring and what they do with their systems. So we hope that if we can create data sets, that just like the green button, there'll be a whole bunch of different applications for finance, for reinsurance, for all the things in the financial community, all of which translate to making it easier for you to get financing and insurance, and for us to develop better products and better pricing. So, how are we going to get it done? Well, we're going to use the old Flip Wilson, if I'm maybe dating myself. The government made me do it. The government has been studying and been advocating open standards, data transparency, data interoperability for years. It goes back to the Clinton administration and when Al Gore invented the internet. So the fact is, it's been well researched. Everybody knows, and there's a complete consensus that the efficiency of data interoperability is clearly recognized. The problem is not technology, it's consensus. So how do you get consensus? Well, the government helps us get consensus by making us. So there's 3 important legislative acts out there that you should be aware of, because if you're not aware of what's happening in the broader world called the forest, you're very focused on your tree, you're focused on what your client needs, what your system is, what your system providers want from you, that you may miss what's happening out there. And what I would suggest to you is that if you look at this, the first thing that happened was the government imposed financial standards on financial reporting. They did this with the Financial Transparency Act, and I might add, XBRL-CET.com has all of these links, has all this information. And if you give me your card, I'm happy to send you a link to this, so you don't have to try to remember any of this stuff. It's all there. But basically, if I were to send you an email that had my address card like we've been talking about, you have a choice. You can, field by field, enter that information into your system, or you can download it in my V-card. So obviously, you choose the download. But you can only do the download if you know that it'll work. Okay? So what the government basically said, the Securities and Exchange Commission, is, hey, you publicly traded companies, I'm tired of getting your PDF, and I manually put field by field all of this financial information into Edgar and our financial analytical tools. We're going to force you to give it to us in XBRL. XBRL is, and I'll touch base with it a little later, and it's not a technical talk, it is extended business reporting language. And the government, you and I, went to every single publicly traded company and gave data tags to every data field in every financial statement presentation. Meaning, we now have a consistent data, and more importantly than that, it's a public resource. It's not anything you're going to subscribe to, it's just something you get to utilize because as a taxpayer, you've already paid for it. Now the other thing that's happening out there, again, the government mandate is a thing called the Data Act. The Data Act passed last year. It's a three-year implementation, which is now 2017, and it's going to require that any receiver of federal funds be able to report back to the government in an open data standard. And so when we talk about open data standards, you might be familiar with data.gov or recovery.gov. At the end of the day, anybody who touches federal dollars are going to have to be able to report back how they spent it so that it can end up at data.gov. That's when I'm talking about mandated compliance. And you think, well, I don't touch federal dollars. I got news for you, just about everybody in this room touches federal dollars. Because it goes to states, it goes to municipalities, it goes to localities. It touches just about anything. So while you may not think you're involved in federal funding, at the end of the day, the processes in order to comply with the federal requirement will find people modifying their systems to comply with it for everything because it doesn't make sense to try to isolate it. And then lastly, the Energy Independence Act recognized that changing from the analog grid that was completely separate from fiefdoms into a unified smart grid was going to be a challenge. So they formed an entity called the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel. It is made up of regulatory agencies, it's made up of utilities, business stakeholders, and all the rest. And the goal is try to figure out how to do this. And so one of my advocacies within the Smart Grid is, hey guys, if you look at it, we can be there. So what is XBRL? XBRL actually is just a taxonomy, it's like a dictionary. And if you go to the Securities Exchange Commission, and you go to the FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Board, or XBRL, they all take you to the same place. And the difference between XBRL and XML is if you have XML, you really just have a data and a tag. In XBRL, I call it XML on steroids, because it has a whole wealth of other information. So if you look at this taxonomy online, you can see the word cash, but it also has 10, 12 different other elements. And the objective here is to squeeze out data into differences. So in other words, if you use cash as pre-tax, and I consider it after-tax, us sharing that field in XML is apples and oranges. What the government has done for us is they have squeezed out the data so that we know exactly what we're talking about. Enough for the federal government to accept financial reporting from public agencies. Well, financial reporting from public agencies, well, that's what I live in. I live in financial reporting. So while it was designed for reporting to the SEC, the fact is, of the 3,000 utilities, over 2,000 of them are publicly traded. So too are some solar companies, and so too are some construction companies. So if I'm in the insurance business, or I'm in the insurance business, or any financial aspect, the chances are pretty darn high that all the data fields we need, the government has already gone through the exercise and squeezed down and have XBRL definitions clearly defined. And not just clearly defined, they've mandated that the utilities adopt them, as well as the solar companies and ours, which means their systems are already there. They're already mapped. The question is, do we tap what is over here in the forest as we're down here focusing on our tree? And if you look at the O&M providers and all the rest, at the end of the day, the information you're really providing is financial. How's it producing? How's the revenue? Well, if we have those all in a common deal, then I don't care what your O&S system is, your CPM, or all the rest, you'll be able to exchange information as easily as you do an address file. So what is our group? We're basically looking at that taxonomy and we're saying, all right, let's look at cash. Okay, that's done. What about another one? Project status. There's a bunch of holes that need to be filled in for it to be considered XBRL. So you can imagine, if you look at 1,000 fields that we may need for interconnection, there's probably 10,000 empty fields. What is the definition? How is it a numerical? It's not hard work, it's grunt work, and real low-end grunt work. So we're trying to put together a collaboration and say, who will help us put this together and what platform can we do it in? So as I mentioned, I go out and I advocate for open standards. Again, I do not advocate as Wells Fargo, because Wells Fargo can't make a decision as to what it's going to receive and all the rest. That has to be an industry solution. So on my community service for small business, I said, I can do the same thing for utility scale construction projects as I can for the small contractor. And so we've reached out with XBRL, we've reached out to Smart Grid Interoperability Panel. We now have a Priority Action Plan 25. We're with IEC, as I mentioned earlier. And we're also working with the construction industry through the Associated General Contractors. And if you look at a project, what we're trying to do is identify where are the data fields, where is the relationships, and so, they've been mapped out. The IEC's done a great job of figuring out who the stakeholders are and what the information flow is and where it goes. And we work with, well, we see 3 key places which would be instrumental for us to be able to do the financial products. So again, our work is based on other people's work. We are not asking anybody to support our effort. Reversely, we are actually trying to support their efforts. There's a lot of efforts out there to try to get standardization. There's a lot of effort to try to put this all together to map it. What I'm finding, though, is that a lot of these efforts are very focused in their niche and very focused in their audience. And if they understood that if they were to widen the audience in the financial communities and all the rest, the payback would be significantly higher. So our goal is not to limit it to energy. Our goal is to bring energy in with the rest of the world and say if we do it for construction as a whole, it'll apply to energy just as much as it applies to building a police station or a roadway. But when we look at a project, we look at what this flow is, we find there's 10 different touch points on a single interconnection project. And from that 10 people, we looked at 2 different data sets that would have covered all 10 systems. Now what those data sets are, we're still working on that, we're still putting that together. But at the end of the day, the objective is to get data sets that can go anywhere with anybody from anywhere. So again, we started with construction. We started trying to help small business. We've done it with a business park in Tracy. But Priority Action Plan 25 really allows us to get into the energy sector with the utilities, with the regulatories, and all the rest. And the mission statement of the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel is to try to figure out how to do best business practices and how to develop data interoperability. I mean, it's in its name. So it's a natural for us. So they have a priority action plan. It's got a whole sequence of steps that we're going through to try to have review processes, collaboration, get insight from industry people. We've even gone to the Department of Energy. They had a contest for data by design, and we showed how we could use this information, and we did a dashboard on how that project would go, and we had a pilot project in California. Ironically, this dashboard is the exact same dashboard we showed the Department of Transportation, because in California, every project in California has a project payment for Caltrans published on the web for transparency. We have a dashboard that oversees $13 billion worth of construction, over 4,000 contracts, and the jobs that we want to know about, the ones that are on the top, are the ones that are behind schedule, have stop notices, and liquidated damages. So there's no difference between when you think about it, writing surety for an energy-related company, whether it's a panel array of 100 panels, or it's a contractor with 100 projects. What we really just need to know is, how's it going? Yes or no. I don't want all the details. There's a difference between what's nice to know and need to know. I just need to know if they're going good. If they're going good, I'm good. And I can provide you the products. If they're going bad, I get to mitigate my exposure, respond and be proactive before I have a loss. So that's the goal. And when you think about our data set, we're able to write multiple different instruments, whether they supply bonds, warranty bonds. We can also write contracts, we can write reinsurance contracts, all the rest, all relying on the same taxonomy, the same dictionary, knowing that when we exchange information between systems, it will be apples to apples. So now I get into the update of the solar bankability. So the Department of Energy has a program called the Sunshot Program, and the Sunshot Program offers grants. They call them funding opportunity announcements, and those announcements basically are a government-funded way to try to get things moving. So they came out with a project called the Solar Bankability Data Bank. Essentially, what are the data standards so that we can improve financial considerations and improve our ability to provide financial products. And if you look at their initial deal, you'll realize just from the highlighted words in red It's exactly what we've been talking about for small business, for all the rest, and it really mirrors exactly what we're talking about. Because what I'm talking about is not proprietary, it's not rocket science. It doesn't, the fact that we can exchange an Outlook file is not a big challenge. It's consensus, and what SB Data basically said is, we want to try to achieve this. Who can help us get there? A number of people responded. A lot of them working through us. We had a number of conference calls, and trying to bring people together. And I tried to get as many people as possible to be aware of the SB Data proposal, to try to get to the table. And one of the things SB Data is going to do, one of their first things they're going to do, is put together a strategy working group. And it'll undoubtedly make up a lot of the people who made respondents, industry people. At the end of the day, they're going to try to figure out how to implement what they come up with and actually then have it sustainable. It's a huge undertaking, but there's a lot of people that are very interested, and a lot of people are looking for being able to do something that matters and makes sense, and I think SB Data is really going to help be a platform for everybody in this room, utilities and all the rest, to have a neutral place to work through what those data sets would be, how would they work, what do we want from them. And so this is really just at the beginning. And so when you're developing software, you're developing strategies in the long run, if you weren't aware that this was going on, you might not tap it. But if you tapped it early and helped nudge it along and influence its direction, then I think you will have a better outcome of SB Data. Because we are truly talking about us providing financial products that can be measured based on the quality of the information we get and can harvest. And those four fields may seem like nothing in the broader scheme of what asset managers deal with and what other people deal with. Us in the financial community just need to know it's working. So next steps, the solar bankability is right now under review, and they're going to be coming out shortly with some direction on where they want to go, and they're going to be forming the strategy working group. And my encouragement to everybody is you should watch this. I think it's going to be a very productive exercise as a group comes together under the DOE's banner and says, okay, here's a data set, just a little one for progress. Here's a data set for this. Let's see what will happen. And I suspect, as the green button did for energy usage, these data sets will create any number of innovative applications out there from some people that we don't even know where they're going to go with. And those applications will then give to me, as a financial provider, the information that will allow me to produce better products, better terms, better conditions. And that is, at the end of the day, that's what we're looking to do. And that's my speech.